Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Completionist and welcome to 2025. So we're into the winter season, guys, so you know what that means for anyone that's been here for a really long time. I'm growing the facial hair out because apparently the missus thinks I look better with facial hair, so I always make the promise to her that during the winter months until the weather starts to get super warm again, I got to start to grow the beard out because apparently she thinks I'm more handsome with it. And I'll have a little bit more free time because my work in the construction environmental field tends to be a little slower over the winter. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity, to get another video made. So the video that I want to make for you guys is a subject that I briefly touched on, on the last video I made. And we're going to do another episode of an unpopular gaming opinion. For those that haven't seen this series before, it's pretty much a series where I take an opinion about a specific video game or a specific video game series. And generally, I have an unpopular point of view about it. That's much different, from the popular point of view. And the topic that I dabbled in my last video that I'm going to present in this video is talking about a much beloved jrpg series that unfortunately only has 2 games in that series. And those games are Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. And the unpopular opinion is that I actually prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger. And the popular opinion is that a lot of people truly love this game and they see Chrono Cross as vastly superior to this title. You'll actually see a title like this usually make number 1 with regards to people's favorite JRPGs of all time. And even if it doesn't make number 1, it'll usually top in a lot of people's top 5 or top 10 games. But apparently I'm one of those crazy people, and I'm actually somebody who actually prefers Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger. And I wanted to make this video explaining why I actually prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger. But before I get into the reasons why I prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger, I just wanted to take a few minutes and just explain to you what Chrono Trigger means to me personally. Because this game got released in 1995, but obviously for anyone who's familiar with my gaming history, especially as a teenager, I didn't have a lot of access to a lot of video games at the time, and I was completely oblivious to even the existence of Chrono Trigger. It seems like a lot of people, my age in their teenage years, they either had the opportunity to come across one of 2 games, especially if they were JRPG fans. And those games were usually either Final Fantasy III for the SNES, which we all know is Final Fantasy VI, and Chrono Trigger, which are often classified, as the best JRPGs, for the Super Nintendo, and also classified as, some of the best JRPGs of all time. But for me, growing up as a teenager, I actually had the opportunity growing up to actually play Final Fantasy III for the SNES, but I didn't really have any opportunity to actually play Chrono Trigger. So I had the opportunity to enjoy one and not the other. And the funny thing is, guys, I never had an opportunity to actually play Chrono Trigger until the winter of 1999. So 4 years after it was 4 years after it was made. And I actually came across it by accident, in the sense that, I was friends with a bunch of people, throughout university, and we got talking about games, and people were talking about Chrono Trigger. And for me, even though, I had Nintendo Power, for a while, and, I used to read a bunch of gaming magazines, it was never a game that was ever brought up. So I had to ask the dumb question, what is Chrono Trigger. And a lot of my friends were absolutely perplexed and flabbergasted, like I said, like, you don't know what Chrono Trigger is? And I said, no, I don't. So the funny thing is like the one of my friends, I think his name was Tim, back in the university days, he actually said, "Do you have a Super Nintendo with you?" And I said, "Yeah, I took my Super Nintendo with me, when I went to university, because obviously, when I first went to university, I never had a Super Nintendo. Sorry, I never had an N64 or a PlayStation 1 or anything along those lines." And he said, "I'll tell you what, I got my copy of Chrono Trigger here. I want you to take the game and I want you to play it, and you don't have to give it back to me until you beat it." And that's exactly what I did in the winter of 1999. I played Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo, and this was even before I'd even played any PlayStation 1 JRPGs, so never had the opportunity to play Final Fantasy 7 or Xenogears or any of that or anything along those lines. And when I played it, instantly hooked, right from the very beginning. Absolutely loved it. But I didn't really have a deep understanding of why that game was so beloved to begin with. But the further that I got into the game personally, I started to understand, why people have a lot of fondness for this game. And so I got to play it, and I managed to beat it after I think about a month and a half of playing it, because I was going to university at the time, and obviously could only spend a few hours, playing it, at any given time, and didn't have access to any guides or anything like that. So I pretty much played the game pure, plain Jane vanilla style. So, but I managed to get through the game and I managed to beat it, and really loved what I got to experience. And as I was playing it, they were actually showing on television at the time, at the university bar and, in the communal TV area, in the university, they started to show, television trailers for Chrono Cross and how it was the long-awaited sequel, to Chrono Trigger. So obviously, I was very excited, to get a hold of it. But I didn't get much of an opportunity, to play Chrono Cross until I finished my first degree in environmental studies, and when I moved to St. John's, I managed to pick up a greatest hits copy of Chrono Cross, and then that's how I had the opportunity to actually play it. But before I got around to playing Chrono Cross, I had watched other people play it and experience it, and a lot of people were excited about the game, but the moment that the game got released, I started to hear a lot of grumblings about how a lot of people were disappointed, and they talked about, and some people had not necessarily such hatred towards the game, but they were ultimately confused, because I guess what they wanted is, they literally wanted a game like Chrono Trigger with in a PS1 graphical style, and they were confused with what was presented to them, because Chrono Cross is one of those games with a very, very convoluted story, and I think it was just because the story wasn't as cut and dry as what Chrono Trigger was, that there were even those people that truly believed that the game wasn't even a sequel to Chrono Trigger. They acknowledged the fact that it took elements of Chrono Trigger. Maybe they took some Easter eggs from Chrono Trigger and turned it into its own game, but if you got to play the game more and more, you actually truly discovered that it is a true sequel to actually Chrono Trigger. Now, before I jump into Chrono Cross, just going back to Chrono Trigger, the one thing that I will admit that Chrono Trigger has over Chrono Cross is that this game is far more appealing to a general audience compared to Chrono Cross. Because in order to truly appreciate Chrono Cross, you have to play Chrono Trigger, because it is a sequel. It is a continuation, of the Chrono Trigger story, even though it's a very long-winded and convoluted way of doing it. But if you want to get your kids into JRPGs, this would be an excellent game to start them on, because it's very easy to pick up and play. It has incredibly likable characters. It has one hell of a soundtrack. Obviously, I've never met a person that's ever had anything bad to say about the soundtracks from Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. And it's really one of those games that can really get somebody into the JRPG genre, especially if they've never had an opportunity to play it before. I always, tell my friends, who have kids, if you want to get your kids into JRPGs, this would be a great game to start them on. But not necessarily argument that my wife came up with, is that the only disadvantage of, if you want to introduce your kid to a JRPG and you start them off at Chrono Trigger, you're literally starting them off with the best of the best. So if they start playing what a lot of people consider one of the most timeless and one of the best JRPG experiences ever, then any other game that they could play, they might consider inferior. So do you want to start someone off with the best of what the JRPG genre has to offer, or do you want to slowly build them up to that? But regardless of your thoughts on this is still a great JRPG, and it's probably one of the most timeless JRPGs out there. Great to introduce the kids or even newcomers into JRPG genre itself. And this, compared to the original SNES version, which I do have down in my game room downstairs, the DS version of Chrono Trigger is the one to play, because it does have extra content, and I think the DS version still has the animated cutscenes, if I remember correctly. And obviously, in this game, absolutely love Frog's theme, absolutely love Robo's theme, and I have mad respect for video game bands that can actually play live versions of Frog's theme and Robo's theme, because it's one of those tracks that you can do an acoustic version of it, you can do a metal version of it, and it still sounds pretty awesome. So it's understandable why Chrono Trigger has the legacy that it has, and why to some people it's often considered the greatest JRPG ever made, and why a lot of people actually prefer Chrono Trigger over Chrono Cross. But alas for me, I tend to be one of those crazy people. So let's get a drink of water, guys. So it begs the million-dollar question throughout this video. Why do I prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger? The simple answer is that this JRPG is it provides an interesting experience. So what do I mean by that? Guys, when it comes to me, enjoying JRPGs, I tend to enjoy JRPGs that often go against popular trends, that are willing to try something different. Not necessarily with regards to gameplay, but also with regards to mood, ambience, storytelling, anything along those lines. There are so many JRPGs out there where, you're a silent protagonist, or you start off in a very simple life, and then you have to save the world, or defeat God, or literally, become the hero of the story. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a tired trope, but it's something that you see, in a lot of JRPGs, and it works. If it didn't work, then we wouldn't have so many JRPGs that use the basic template of of what you would see in not only standard JRPGs but also Western RPGs as well. But one of the reasons why I tend to enjoy games like Xenogears and Valkyrie Profile is it's not only that I prefer my games a little on the dark side, that are willing to break away from traditional JRPG norms, but I like games that touch on sadness, depression, just basically scene characters and scene scenarios that seem really unfair, not only to the heroes but to NPCs, to non-playable characters. I often have gravitate towards games that tend to be a little on the dark side, a little on the sad side. And the strange thing about Chrono Cross is, if you really read between the lines of what Chrono Cross is, it's not a very happy game. It really isn't. It's a very somber game. It's a very melancholy game. You often feel like, as you're playing the game, that there's this resounding aura of just sadness throughout the entire experience, because there's so much tragedy that happens to the game. Now, in this section of the video, guys, I am going to talk about spoilers, but the games are over 25 years old, so I'm under the assumption that all you guys have played these games before, so apologies in advance if I spoil anything, but I can't really talk about why I love Chrono Cross so much without getting it into spoilers. So, with regards to the spoilers, guys, it may be the music, but it's a lot of the elements that this game looks at. It just has a lot of sadness associated to it, because what Chrono and his party did in the first game, obviously, that they saved, the world from the destruction of Lavos. But every action has a cost. And this is more prevalent, as you get to go through the story with Surge, because one of the things that that you'll discover as you're playing the game is the death of Chrono and Meryl and Luca, because actions have consequences. And at the end of the day, as much as we would like to think that we can control our own fate, ultimately we can't. Or sometimes there are could be divine entities or anything like that will try to right the wrongs of, especially when it comes to time travel. And that was actually quite shocking to me, as I got to play through the game, and that suddenly started to become a realization. Because even though, the Chrono Cross story can be really convoluted, because you're dealing with alternative timelines and, different dimensions. And even though the ultimate enemy in Chrono Cross is, the Time Devourer, ultimately what the game is, the purpose of the game, it's a rescue mission. That's what it is. You have to rescue Shala. That's basically the overall point of Chrono Cross, from what I've been able to deduce, from watching videos about Chrono Cross Explained and things along those lines. Now, it's a very convoluted way of actually trying to rescue Shala, but that's literally, the purpose of the story of Chrono Cross. Because the thing is that one legacy that Chrono Cross has had throughout my entire gaming life is that still to this day, it has my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. And this is coming from a guy in which Xenogears is my favorite game of all time. But for as much as I love Xenogears, I think this is Yasunori Mitsuda's best video game soundtrack with regards to Chrono Cross. I think this is a soundtrack that can convey so much emotion. And even for me as a guy that constantly deals with depression on a nearly constant basis, when it comes to me playing video games, I don't generally show a lot of emotion because there's always that thought in the back of my mind that what I'm playing is, completely fictional. So there's no point for me to feel emotionally invested in this game. But this is one of the few games that can actually convey emotion. And this is one of the few games that's actually made me tear up, throughout a lot of the very difficult, sad scenes that this game conveys. And one of the things that lends to the strength of these scenes is its impeccable soundtrack. There are just so many tracks in this game that really touch at the heartstrings. It could be anything, from Radical Dreamers, for as simplistic as that track is, where it's literally just guitar strings and a choir. Or even beautiful tracks like Garden of God or Star Stealing Girl. And to this day, this game has one of my favorite moments, but it's a sad moment, but it's also a very character building moment. And if you haven't already figured it out, for those people who have played Chrono Cross, it's Luca's letter to Kid. That was a very heartbreaking thing to experience and to read. And that was probably the scene that probably got me to tear up the most out of all the JRPGs I've ever played. And the fact that a letter coming from one of the original characters in Chrono Trigger to a character in Chrono Cross that contemplates her actions in the original game and how it may affect someone's future actually hit me a lot harder than what I would ever expect. And then you have the finale of the game. Doing the color code to make sure that you cast all the spells or use all the right attacks in the right colored orders, so you can activate the Chrono Cross and eventually win the game. But the entire journey just has an overall sad aura to it. And I've never played another JRPG in my entire life in which you're constantly bombarded with sadness, uncertainty, just this thought that maybe what you're doing doesn't matter, because the overall plot of Chrono Cross takes a really long time to establish, and there's a lot of turns and twists on the way, especially when you're going through that journey, and you really have to be invested into it from the very beginning. And it doesn't have such a nice simplistic story that that Chrono Trigger has, and I think and unfortunately that was the game's biggest detriment, is because it was such a convoluted story, and it was a very hard to follow story, and sometimes it was very hard to understand. It also didn't help that there were a ton of characters in the game as well, the majority of them being relatively useless and not really having much to deal with the overall plot. But the only other game that I can really think of that that really has kind of like a sadness aura to it, or like a life is unfair kind of aura to it, is, you know, Valkyrie Profile. Especially the original game, because all the Einherjar that you get to recruit, you know, you get to see their sad story of like how they actually die. And I actually like games that are willing to be a little daring like that, and that are not afraid to take risks. That kind of like drift away from like the typical hero saving the world story, to really put some emotion into the story that they're trying to present. And I think Chrono Cross does that in such a way that I really haven't seen in a lot of games. And it's just unfortunate that a lot of people, especially when the game first got released, a lot of fans couldn't get their head around that. Now, it's of no fault to them. You know, if Chrono Trigger had such a profound impact in my life, if they were going to work on a sequel to Chrono Trigger, I would want it to be exactly like Chrono Trigger. I would want to see a continued journey of, you know, Chrono and Frog and Robo and, you know, all these characters, you know, as they go on another adventure. But the fact that we got something different, but what we got was a deeply emotional game that really used its music to its full advantage. Because it's as I said before, guys, Chrono Cross is not, it's not a happy game. There's not like a lot of happy, silly moments in the game. You know, there's a lot of tragedy. As you're trying to rescue Shala, and you have to deal with like kids poisoning, and then you have that time traveling sequence back to Luca's house that actually that's prone to causing a lot of emotion. And it's just, as you're going through the finale of Chrono Cross, like you feel so vindicated about the journey that you've overcome, but by the end of it, you're really emotionally exhausted because the game has been playing with your emotions for such a long time, as you're trying to understand, you know, everything that's happening. And I don't think there's ever going to come another game that will cause me to feel as much emotion as what Chrono Cross has. And its music is what really helps evolve that emotion, because I've never played a game that just has a very sad, depressing vibe to it, especially, you know, throughout the entire experience. You know, sure, in Chrono Cross there's a few brief humorous moments, you know, there's a few brief silly moments, but the entire game just has this really somber vibe to it, and it's just something that I haven't seen in a lot of JRPGs, and it's one of the reasons why, you know, it's conveyed so much emotion to me. And for as much as I love Chrono Trigger as a JRPG, and that game has its, you know, its sad moments as well, the initial death of Chrono, you know, what Robo had to go through, you know, to save a forest, you know, from erosion, and then you have, you know, Frog losing his best friend, but the sadness and the overall aura of Chrono Cross just like trumps those moments so much more. And it's just that it just felt, by the time I finished Chrono Cross, it just gave me this feeling of just, wow. Like what an adventure, and just what a beautiful, sad, somber way of just doing things, of just taking this game and, you know, connecting it, you know, to the original Chrono Trigger, because ultimately one of the things I take out of Chrono Cross is sometimes fate may be inescapable, and sometimes when you try to do the right thing, it can often lead to disastrous results. And it's one of the reasons why I love the Chrono series so much. Some items, I would love for you guys to like check out. One thing I got for my wife for Christmas one year was I got this from the Square Enix store, and it's called the Chrono Orchestra. So it's orchestral versions of the Chrono Cross and the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. I don't know if they still have this available on the Square Enix website, but it's 3 CDs, so it's orchestral versions of Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger, and I think the third CD is a piano arrangement of other tracks from the two Chrono games. And one thing that I actually got for my wife last year is we love to collect Blu-rays of like video game concerts. I think this is the third one I've gotten for my wife. I got her the Xenogears concert that they held in 2018, and I got her the concert that they did for music from Star Ocean and Valkyrie Profile. And they did this concert in 2019, and it's the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers concert. I highly recommend this one. This was such a fun watch. I didn't get a chance to watch all of it. I kind of watched bits and pieces with it with my wife, as we were taking down Christmas decorations. And there's so many instruments used in this concert, and it seemed like, the entire band was just having such a fun, happy time with, doing the music for this game, because obviously, like there's flutes and there's harps and there's guitars and keyboards, and just you can tell that I often feel like Yasunori Mitsuda really put his best ideas and his best work into the soundtrack, because he covers like so much emotion in these tracks. And if you have an opportunity to get this, I highly recommend it. I don't know if you can find it on the Square Enix store anymore. You might be able to find it on PlayAsia or hopefully on eBay. But this is one thing I would highly recommend that you guys get. And so that is pretty much the reason why I prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger. It's not a matter of just which game has the best gameplay or the best story. It's for the emotions. It's pretty much for the emotional ride that the overall experience gave me. And for as fun as Chrono Trigger was, I pretty much took Chrono Trigger as just a standard JRPG adventure with one hell of a soundtrack and a lot of heart. But Chrono Cross is one of those things that it's going to make you think. And maybe by the time you finish the game for the first time, because there's a lot of like cryptic metaphors throughout the game, because the overall conclusion is really up to interpretation. But I like games that like make you think, and if it takes you on one hell of an emotional ride, then all the power, for the game to do so. So anyway, guys, those are my personal thoughts on why I prefer Chrono Cross over Chrono Trigger. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, because if you ask most Chrono fans, they'll definitely take Trigger over Cross. Maybe if Chrono Cross didn't go so heavy with the emotions and the really convoluted storyline, I think fans would have had an easier time, swallowing, what they were being offered. But I don't fault the game for going the route that it did, and it still remains an important game in my life. The strangest thing is, guys, like between with regards to Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger, is I've beaten both games, but I haven't completed them. Chrono Trigger takes 2 playthroughs to do all the endings. Chrono Cross takes 3. And obviously, there's a lot of different endings, different scenarios, all depending on the characters that you beat the game with. So maybe in the future, God only knows when, you know, I'll actually get around to actually completing these two games and, you know, permanently retiring them for good. But at the end of the day, I know where they stand in my life. They're still important, you know, for JRPGs and their importance in the gaming genre. It's ultimately Chrono Cross just had a far much more important impact in my life than what Chrono Trigger ever did. So anyway, guys, that takes care of another episode of The Completionist. I really hope you enjoyed listening to another unpopular gaming opinion of mine. So before closing, guys, I'm going to try to make a few more videos, you know, especially this year. Work was kind of busy, but kind of not, because I didn't really know, you know, which projects I was going on, and a lot of times, you know, certain things would come up last minute, and it was really hard, you know, to kind of find a motivation, you know, to make videos. So what I want to ask from you guys before I end this video is give me ideas. Like, are there any things in the gaming industry that you want me to talk about? Are there any games that you want me to share my personal memories about? You know, like I said, you know, I'm starting to diversify into different topics. You know, obviously, you know, I still have my a completionist point of view, you know, an unpopular gaming opinion, my personal struggles as a video game completionist, and defending bad games, you know, because often I have a habit of actually enjoying games that are universally hated on. So if you guys have any suggestions for any video content, I would highly welcome it. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching another episode of me rambling. So I hope to make more content over 2025. So as always, take care, and I wish you nothing but the best. Later.